Hi, this is an interesting story about Naomi Wolf. She's a former advisor to Bill Clinton and Al Gore, and she may have here, according to this report, have set a record for the fastest discrediting of a book when a BBC interviewer showed her that the central thesis of her book was based on a misreading of legal terminology. In her book, Outrageous Sex, Censorship, and the Criminalization of Love, she made the claim that the British government continued to execute people for sodomy long after it was previously thought that the practice had ended. Wolf looked at records from the Old Bailey and saw the term death recorded, a term she realizes in this interview actually refers to cases in which a sentence of death is passed but suspended. She had believed to have found several dozen executions, and that her research she had initially claimed corrects a misapprehension that is in every website that the last man executed for sodomy in Britain was in 1835. Well, I mean, this first of all, who is Naomi Wolf? Let's take a look. To keep things brief, basically, she first came to prominence, according to Wikipedia, in 1991 as the author of The Beauty Myth. With this book, she became the leading spokesman, or a leading spokesman, of what was later described as the third wave of the feminist movement. What is the third wave? There's all kinds of articles on this, but it's all basically leftist crap. I think basically the Urban Dictionary, ironically, gives the best kind of definitions you can find for this, because this is how it's perceived, certainly on my side of the aisle. So basically, this is third wave feminism. So basically, feminism was a wonderful thing, and right, I'm all for liberating of women, and women do what they want, totally for it, absolutely. Until this particular wave of feminism, that's the third wave. It's a movement mostly based on social media where women can complain about stupid things such as not going out topless, and even if they did go out topless, they'd complain about getting stared at. Claim that there's a rape culture in the West, which is extraordinary, given the fact that this is in 2019. There was no rape culture in the 1990s and 1980s either. And the idea that things are worse now is just crazy. It's just a totally manufactured crisis. Because Instagram and schools have certain dress codes and rules, they claim they're for equality, but then they shove the dictionary's definition of feminism down your throat, yet still ignore any shit that men go through and happily admit that they are misandriates, that they don't like men, by creating hashtags such as kill all men and masculinity so fragile. Pretty much. And here's another one. If you believe that women get paid 23 cents less per hour, which is idiotic, then you're part of third wave feminism. If you believe that women deserve different treatment, you're part of third wave feminism, because to deserve different treatment means you're pro-sexism, because basically you want an advantage over everybody else. It has nothing to do with equality. It's exactly the opposite. It's about inequality. It's about lording it over men. If you believe that men's voices should be silenced, you're part of third wave feminism. If you believe that women are oppressed, you're part of third wave feminism. Yeah, women are oppressed. Not the women I've associated with. If you identify as a feminist in the 21st century, you're part of third wave feminism. And so on and so forth. Okay. To continue on with the original Daily Caller article, the presenter, this is the BBC guy, Matthew Sweet, somebody who did his job for a change on the BBC, pointed to her the case of Thomas Silver in 1859. Wolf claims in her book that Silver was executed, but he was not, because death recorded meant that the judge used judicial discretion to suspend a death sentence, a practice in use since the 1820s. I don't think any of the executions you've identified here actually happened, Sweet added. And Wolf, to her credit, replied, that's a really important thing to investigate. Sweet also added that the offense in question hardly makes a good example of same-sex love being criminalized, as it involved a 14-year-old's indecent assault on a 6-year-old boy. Yeah, that's the thing about the left. I mean, I've got a book here. Let me see here. For example, this is the Chinese Opium Wars is written by Jack Beeching. He was a former Communist Party recruiter in the UK. It's nice. It's a well-written book, but it has no footnotes, because footnotes, of course, would be inconvenient. He has a very kind of if I can dig it up here in a second. How does he explain? Oh, here we go. I'm reading from this section here. This is with footnotes, materials for the blah blah blah. Okay. This is kind of like her. Materials for the serious academic history of the Chinese Opium Wars, which has not yet been written, are abundant. For instance, there are over 2,000 books, blah 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 blah. And then here's his excuse for not footnoting stuff: to append a scholarly apparatus of references to an essay in popular narrative history compiled from less than 100 sources, all secondary and in only 2 languages, would be willfully misleading. Oh. It would be misleading to have to footnote your book because you know secondary sources and in 2 languages, blah 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 blah. Oh, so for example, in this glorious book, when he's talking about looting, he references he quotes somebody. I forget the officer who it was. Maybe it's John Octoloni. Anyway, and looting a villa basically in Shanghai. And I'm familiar with the writing style, and I thought, wait a minute, I know that guy. And so I guess it's probably Octoloni. I looked the guy up. I looked at the incidents of looting, and you know what the guy was looting? The guy was stealing fruit from a fruit tree. He was embarrassed. He wrote about it. He said, you know, we broke into this yard, and we took some fruit. Okay, now why would you break into a yard and take fruit? Well, these guys are sailors. What's the worst concern of sailors? Okay, and they've been on the ocean for a long time. Scurvy. Right? They had lack of vitamin C. So why did they steal fruit? Because they wanted to get access to vitamin C. So in the middle of a war, they stole some fruit. This is the looting. Okay, that Beeching is talking about, right? But Beeching doesn't want you to know that they're stealing fruit, so he leaves out the section about the fruit. And of course he doesn't footnote it, so it makes it difficult for you to find the thing, because unless you're like me, unless you actually have written a book on the Opium War, which I've done, then you won't know how to find the bloody source. Although of course I did. Right? And that's the thing. It's just it goes to this where she's talking about it. You know, the person that she cited who was immorally executed for sodomy. In other words, his homosexual lifestyle was being oppressed by the law. Actually turns out to be a 14-year-old rapist, a guy who banged a 6-year-old kid. Why would you choose such an example like this? But I presume that, of course, that she didn't mention raise this in the book. I don't know if she did or not. I haven't read the book. But when this is the kind of thing that you find when people are activists and they're trying too hard to make a case, and you find this all the time. You know, remember the Ferguson case with what was his name? With regard to Ferguson, I mean Ferguson, Missouri, when you had the shooting of Michael Brown. So what you have is you have a guy who robbed a store, and then later on tried to grab a cop's gun and was shot and as a consequence of trying to disarm a police officer, and probably would have shot the police officer if he had gotten a hold of the gun. Why would you protest and try to make a case that you have police brutality when you're dealing with a guy who robbed a store just moments before he got shot? I mean, it's just crazy. And it was the same thing with the Kavanaugh. Remember the Kavanaugh whole not scandal, but whatever you call it, scandal for lack of a better word. When you had what's her name? I was referring to Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, whose basically her testimony consisted of, you know, when did this happen? I don't know. How'd you get to the home? I don't know. On what floor of the home did the sexual assault take place? I don't know. How'd you get home? I don't know. Do you have any witnesses? Yeah, all of whom deny that her testimony. And then, of course, later on, of course, she's caught lying about travel. She's terrified of airplane travel. Although it turns out, of course, she flies all over the bloody place. Not the French Riviera, but the French Polynesia, in Hawaii, or her ex-boyfriend, whatever else, testified to all this kind of stuff. I mean, these are just the weakest reeds upon which to make a case if you want to talk about sexual discrimination or let's say the oppression of women by men. I mean, why would you get behind somebody like Blasey Ford? It's just crazy. Why would you go behind somebody like Michael? I cannot remember anybody's name when I'm making these videos. Michael Brown, right? It's just crazy. Anyway, I'll just kind of leave it at this then. Basically, my point being essentially that this is just one of the problems with activists is that they're so hell-bent on making their case that they'll cite any example and they'll stretch it as far as possible to make their point. When, of course, if you were actually a little bit more detached, and you're actually trying to pursue the truth and trying to figure out how things actually worked, you wouldn't do this at all. I mean, it comes down to the difference in psychology. Activists tend to be relatively unintelligent people. They get their drama queens. They get very excited about immoral situations, or the oppression of this person by that person. Basically, what they're looking for is they make a fetish of good hats versus bad hats. And what an intelligent person does is an intelligent person tries to understand the system. Why do people? How do people? Why are certain, let's say, characters or personality types? Why do they emerge in certain or thrive in certain systems? Because 9 times out of 10, the system makes the person. It's not a matter of a person being a good person or a bad person. It's a matter of this, like I say, of if you have a system which doesn't have free speech protections, then people are going to lie. It's pointless saying that a person's an evil person for being a serial liar when the system does not encourage truth telling, right? If you have free speech protections, people can go out and say whatever they want to whomever they want. They can talk truth to power, but they cannot do that otherwise. And so it is ridiculous. For example, if you look at a place like China, which doesn't have free speech protections right now, if you expect people to be politically courageous or to be verbally courageous in public, it's crazy. People are not going to do that because of the system. It's not because Chinese people don't have intestinal fortitude. It's because the people who are Chinese in that particular environment are naturally not going to be very courageous about certain things because it doesn't pay to do so. Right? There's no positive reinforcement. There's no stimulus pushing them, propelling them in that direction. Anyway, all right, I'll leave it at this. Basically, anyway, I hope I said something useful, and hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.